Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. This is Scott Reisch of Crime Talk, and we have a busy docket today. First, a bizarre tragedy in Virginia. Second, some people should never be allowed to reproduce. Third, a Houston woman shows tremendous strength. The Varsity Blues are back in the news. PragerU versus Google. And finally on the docket, we have something that we need to discuss. It's called Patreon. Let's talk about it. I mentioned it in yesterday's video. Some people have complained that the merchandise is just a little too expensive. There's not a lot we could do because the prices were set by Teespring. However, we have been able to negotiate some price reduction, and starting Friday, there is a sale on Crime Talk merch. So if you want to get that mug, now's the time to get that mug. If you'd like to get that t-shirt, now's the time to get that t-shirt. I personally like the one that says lawyer, lawyer, lawyer. Why? Because that's what you say when the police want to talk with you. And if you want to get that sweatshirt, now is the time to do it. Huge, huge savings starting Friday for the Labor Day weekend. First on the docket is a bizarre tragedy out of Virginia. An 18-year-old, Matthew Bernard, is being charged with the alleged triple murder of a woman, her son, and her mother. This case caught the world's attention because the suspect was seen running around naked, eluding the police, and also the victims are related to a minor league baseball player. Few details are known about the homicide at this point, but what we do know is that one woman was found dead in the driveway of the residence. The other victims were discovered inside the home. The man is being held in custody with no bond at this time and also for a mental health evaluation. This one has strange written all over it, and the question is going to be, I think, whether he was on something or whether he has mental health issues. So another tragedy, unfortunately. The next matter on the docket is some people should not be allowed to reproduce. And unfortunately, this is another case from the state of Colorado where another young child, in this case a newborn, will never get to have the life that he or she deserved because of a young mother's selfishness. This young woman is 26 years old, and her name is Camille Wassinger Conrad. Tuesday, in the 18th Judicial District down in Douglas County, she was convicted of child abuse resulting in death, a position of trust. She was also found guilty of tampering with physical evidence, and although they sent the sentencing out until November, she is going to receive a maximum life sentence. What's disturbing about this is that in the early morning hours of January 2nd of 2018, Miss Wassinger gave birth in her bedroom. She covered the baby's mouth and nose to stop her from crying so as not to awaken others in the home. She then carried the newborn downstairs to the back deck. She then threw the baby into the backyard of a neighbor, according to the prosecutors. The neighbors found the child at approximately 9:48 p.m. that night and called the sheriff's department immediately. The cause of death was suffocation because it was smothered. Obviously, it was ruled a homicide. Even more disturbing is the fact that she had to hurl this newborn 11 feet over an 8-foot fence, knowing that she was sending this child to its death. The little girl died in the cold and wasn't even given the dignity of receiving a name. Miss Wiggins will not be able to reproduce because she will be spending the rest of her life in prison. Colorado has a safe haven law which allows new parents to hand over an infant up to 72 hours to any employee at a fire station or hospital with no questions asked as long as the child is unharmed. That is all she had to do. And this child could have had a vibrant future. Even as a defense attorney, it's cases like that that still shock the conscience. Our next case on the docket is a young woman showing extreme strength and courage. This case comes out of Houston, Texas. The defendant, Ron Haskell, is charged with multiple murders. It turns out that Mr. Haskell was a vindictive and vengeful person and the ex-husband of Casey Stay's sister, Melania. Haskell is accused of arriving at the front door appearing to be a delivery person. Cassidy Stay answered the door, let him know that her parents weren't home, and ultimately took them in the home and, killing execution style, Cassidy's mother, Katie, her father, Stephen, and 4 siblings were all shot to death in the home outside of Houston. Cassidy, who survived by playing dead, described on the stand how the room smelled like blood. It tasted sour. It felt heavy and hot. There was no spirit in the room, as Casey described it on the stand. This case goes back to July 9th of 2014, as Mr. Haskell has delayed these proceedings to see if there were mental health issues. His attorneys have claimed that he was not sane at the time of the event, and he faces the death penalty. This seems long for a case to go to trial, given the fact that this is in Texas. Normally, they have what they refer to as rocket dockets. I can tell you, from the defense attorney's perspective, having to cross-examine a survivor or a child of anything like this is one of the worst things that a defense attorney has to do, but it is absolutely necessary to represent the client, to exercise their constitutional rights, and for the most part, most attorneys will be completely respectful and treat the victim/witness with complete respect, because although defense attorneys get a bad rap, oftentimes you have to remember they're trying to get the information from the witness as politely as possible, because you don't want to do anything to upset the jury. And already worse in Mr. Haskell's case, since there's multiple killings, it doesn't matter. So there's no reason to go after any witnesses. So we'll follow this case as it progresses, but it doesn't look good for Mr. Haskell. So the next matter on the docket today is Lori Loughlin. Why do you care, you ask? Well, Varsity Blues is back in the news because Miss Loughlin and her husband, Massimo Giannulli, were back in court yesterday. The court wanted to make a record about her counsel of choice. Miss Loughlin and her husband both have a right to counsel of their choice, but normally the court is not going to allow a defendant to have the same attorney. Why? It's a conflict of interest. Yes, it can be done in civil cases because we're really kind of talking about money, but it's very, very rare in a criminal case where 2 defendants will have the same attorney. And if there's a conflict or a perceived conflict, then the court wants to make it absolutely clear that they are knowingly and voluntarily waiving this conflict of interest, so that if Miss Loughlin and her husband lose, they can't come back and say, oh, there was a conflict of interest. In this particular case, Miss Loughlin and her husband had to appear in court and were advised by the court that there was a potential conflict. The conflict is that Miss Loughlin and her husband's attorneys did legal work for the University of Southern California, the school at issue in this particular case, the school that has its own exposure in this particular case, the school that wants to try and cooperate the best they can to limit their own exposure. So when you have a law firm and that duty of loyalty is going to be imposed upon that law firm, An attorney in that firm cannot represent somebody with an adverse interest. The court inquired, and the Loughlins made very clear that they're aware of the potential conflict. They don't see it as a conflict, and therefore they're okay proceeding with their particular counsel. The court did this so that if Ms. Loughlin and her husband lose a trial, they can't then come back after their appeal and say, I received ineffective assistance of counsel because my attorney didn't zealously represent me because he had a greater duty to USC. He wanted to represent them more than he wanted to represent me. He received pressure from his partners. Don't do anything that's going to upset USC and getting future business for them in the future. Those are the arguments that the court wants to avoid. Those are the issues that the court advised them of. They decided to go forward with that, and they get to keep their counsel, but that issue is done and over. I had a case once. It was a horrible, for lack of a better term, sexual assault, gang rape case. And one attorney was allowed to represent two brothers. I couldn't believe that it was allowed to go forward. The court inquired. The two defendants signed waivers, and it ultimately went on appeal after they lost. And they also raised that the fact that the alleged crime scene, a truck, was given as payment to this particular attorney. I was shocked, couldn't believe it, but it went up on appeal. What do you think the first thing that the two brothers raised? My attorney had a conflict of interest. He should have been pointing the finger at my brother because I was less culpable than the other guy. Well, the Court of Appeals rejected that argument, given the numerous waivers, given the fact that they were told they shouldn't be allowed to do that. I've seen judges tell people, you're not representing two people in the same case, not in my courtroom. We're not having those issues. That would have been the cleaner thing to do. Frankly, that would have been the cleaner thing to do here, but it would have delayed the proceedings as well in the Loughlin matter. Next up on the docket is a case that was heard at the Ninth Circuit yesterday, and it's called PragerU University versus Google. Now, why did I not say that word, the plaintiff? Well, the reason is that if we're not already demonetized, given the fact that we're talking about what took place in the world, and we're not using language any worse than you would see on the evening news, Google, who owns YouTube, probably doesn't want it highlighted the fact that they're being sued because they've demonetized and taken down channels because somebody at Google doesn't like their thought or doesn't like the words that they're actually using. I can tell you the words like murder, homicide are key flags. That's a problem when you're talking about a crime talk channel and you're discussing bad things that go on in the world. We try to keep it respectful. We try to keep it clean. And frankly, I don't think we get any more graphic than what you would see on the evening news in most cases. But we have had literally 17 of our last, say, 25 videos demonetized because of the word murder. So, for example, if you wanted to go to Prager University videos, Google wouldn't let you see the one that said murder, discussing the 10 commandments, thou shalt not murder. So apparently now there's only 9 commandments according to Google. And hey, I like Google. I use their search engine. I use YouTube. But this is getting a little ridiculous, so I really hope the Ninth Circuit says something to the effect of, you can't just shut down these words because they're words. You have to look at the words in the context in which they're actually being used and not look at some algorithm to do that. I can tell you, we can put a video up. It'll be monetized for about 5 minutes or less, and then we'll be demonetized. We'll miss our initial rush of people, and then we will appeal, and some get overturned and some are basically sustained, and it says it's not appropriate. I can tell you, our little field trip that we took down to La Junta, Colorado, YouTube/Google demonetized that for some reason. Now, We appealed it and was brought back, but that shows you how ridiculous that was. We were basically showing you pictures of me driving with cows out in the field, and someone at Google, maybe their artificial intelligence or a viewer, flagged it, and there you go. It's ridiculous. So that's why I want to talk to you about Patreon. I don't know if you all are familiar with Patreon, but basically it is a way for people to support this channel. Now, do I like going to people and saying, will you send me money? No. I'm a firm believer that if you're going to ask for money, you should get something in exchange for it, right? If I say go buy the mug, hopefully go buy the mug. You're getting something in exchange for it. Hopefully you think that you're receiving something of value if you would like to do that. Am I going to quit my day job as an attorney? No. What I would like to do is simply cover my costs. That's it. Okay? I have the expenses of what I believe to be a very good, if not great, editor, producer, marketing, and any other role that I have asked Kyle to fill. I pay him. I'm not going to stop paying him. And frankly, this pursuit was never to necessarily make a ton of money. It was to educate people. And that's what I like to do. But I would also like to not go broke doing it either. So we've looked into Patreon. Patreon is basically, it is a subscription. You can ask people to contribute a certain amount of dollars, and based upon certain levels, they get certain things back in exchange. So maybe we could see by a show of hands or by a comment below whether you would be supportive of us starting a Patreon program. We envision that it would have various levels to simply a recurring donation, to certain levels where we would send you a mug or a cup and maybe something else down the road, and a very high level where I would perhaps call you once a month and we would talk about actual crime cases going on that interest you, and maybe another level where we have a private page on Facebook where we can do a private page, do chats, do live conversations, and maybe talk about things before we send it out to the regular YouTube world. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm really not pandering for money, but it's kind of my way of sticking it to Google, is to say that if you're going to be ridiculous, I'm going to be creative, I'm going to be resourceful, and that I don't need you. It's my way of getting creative and resourceful and saying that I am not going to be completely reliant upon YouTube. Thanks for watching. If you like the channel, please subscribe. If you like the video, hit that like button. Leave us a comment. We appreciate, and do try to respond to what you have to say. And hit that little bell so that you receive notifications of new content and when we go live. Have a great day.